Hola and welcome to The Get Down. I'm Ritzy P. In this episode, during our All Things Butterscotch segment with the CEO and managing editor of Butterscotch Media, Clev Mesador, we'll discuss how the profile of the crypto voter is diverse. Then we'll have a convo with our very special guest, Elena Giralt. She is founder of Blockchain Latinx and senior product marketing manager at Hyro Systems. A few things discussed in this episode is why she created Blockchain Latinx in 2018, how the Latino community has grown in crypto since then, and so much more. So now let's get into all things butterscotch. Hola, Clev. It's time for all things butterscotch. How are you?
Oh my God, I am so excited about our podcast, our tip sheet newsletter, and the events we have planned. Since we've launched the podcast, it's been amazing, amazing, amazing. So I'm especially excited about today's episode. But first things first.
Okay, so let's start by discussing that special episode with eToro US CEO Lule.
Yes. So Lule Demisi is the US CEO of eToro, and she is amazing. I have known her for a while now. She's a Black female CEO of a major blockchain company. And one of the things she's focused on is the retail investor and how that has changed. Like there was a time when investing was just for an exclusive club, like the good old boys club. And even the retail investor was a high net worth person who had a banker or some type of advisor. And that is no longer the case. So in her role as CEO of eToro, Lule has been doing a lot of research on the changing profile of the retail investor and really getting down to who is this new retail investor? What are some of the issues? We talked about risk. We talked about, some of the perceptions about them. It was a great conversation.
That's fascinating. So in, the Butterscotch Media's tip sheets called Choose. If you're not subscribed, please subscribe. You feature data that shows the profile of the crypto voter in this election that is also so diverse. So you've also written about this in Forbes. Could you break this down for our audience today?
Yeah. And again, to make that correlation to the episode with Lule talking about the non-traditional retail investor, and that person is diverse. And those investors are actually lower middle class and middle income. It is no longer a rich man's gig. But we also know that within blockchain and cryptocurrency, the earliest and largest adapters are communities of color, young people, the working class. And we know that is also the profile of the quintessential crypto voter. As you mentioned, I wrote about this in my Forbes column. But also, there's been several data, most recently by the company Paradigm. They did a study on the crypto voter and found, again, very inclusive, very, very, smart and savvy. They care about issues like blockchain and cryptocurrency. We keep saying crypto is not a monolith and that we need to focus more on, diverse segments of the industry because we are the new retail investor, and this election cycle, we are the quintessential voter that will actually have an impact this election.
So you've known today's amazing guest, Elena, since 2019. How did you guys first meet?
Well, you know what? I was a fangirl and I wanted to create this thing called, a congressional delegation of women of color and do a brunch on Capitol Hill. And I wanted a contemporary that did not come from the same, crypto experience that I had. And I knew Elena as a Latina had been working, within the Ethereum space, was very thoughtful in terms of her approach, and her leadership of Blockchain Latinx was so great. So I DM'd her on LinkedIn, sent her a message and said, hey, would you mind co-hosting this thing for me? And in 2019, she said, sure. And we've been doing it ever since. This year marks the 5th anniversary. And for 5 years, we've been getting together, doing the hard work of bringing a delegation of women to Washington, doing the hard work of, identifying these women, making sure their accommodations are covered, getting sponsorship, but making sure that they actually have access to the power brokers who are looking at the regulatory framework. So, I'm excited about the conversation you're going to have with her. She's amazing, very thoughtful on this issue. And definitely because of the work that she's been doing, we actually have this very vibrant and inclusive market.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for everything that you do, Clev, to bring everyone together, to speak to policymakers and have these crazy, amazing, important conversations. So I look forward to our next discussion about all things butterscotch. Gracias.
Thank you.
Hola and welcome, my butterscotch queen. How are you?
I'm good, Ritzy. Thank you for having me on today.
Awesome. Well, let's discuss your journey into crypto and how your Web3 career has evolved.
Yeah, so my journey in crypto started in 2016. I was in grad school at NYU, and I took a class called Digital Currencies. And that was really transformative. I feel like most people, when they get excited about blockchain or crypto, they usually have to kind of like self-educate, open a million tabs, go through a bunch of Wikipedia articles, figure out who to follow on Twitter. I had the privilege to go through kind of like a structured college course. It was a fully fleshed out syllabus with recommended readings. And then I had a literal front row seat to hear from some of the most influential and impactful technologists and engineers and founders in the industry. So I remember like Scott Stornetta, who's cited in the Bitcoin white paper, he came to talk, and many, many, many others. So that was kind of the start. After that class, I wrote a research paper on crypto adoption in Venezuela. That's where my family's from. And then it was kind of like a whirlwind. It was a 2017 bull run, the ICO boom that followed. I graduated in 2018, and I knew I wanted to work in this industry full time. I had actually never worked in tech or fintech. My career before grad school was in nonprofit administration and media. So it was a huge culture shock jumping into not just tech, not just startups, but Web3. But I'm still here 5 years later. It's been a journey. It's been a lot of fun. You asked kind of how the career has evolved.
Yes.
So I've been in 3 different ecosystems at this point. Ethereum, I worked in Zcash, it's privacy preserving zero knowledge proof protocol. And most recently, I'm in the Bitcoin space, specifically working in the Stacks ecosystem, talking about kind of smart contracts and bringing them to Bitcoin. So it's been fun.
That's awesome. You've been all over and you're so young. So why don't you let us know, why did you create Blockchain Latinx?
Yes, Blockchain Latinx is a joy for me. It's a labor of love. And I started it in 2018, kind of right after I graduated from grad school. The main reason I started is because I wanted that community for myself. I like to call it a safe space for hot takes. I'm going to paint a picture of what 2018 was like for people in the industry. Everyone was so excited about the potential of this technology. And it was kind of, I won't say just starting out, but it was kind of 5 years into its run-up. So still in its infancy. And people were on panels talking about its potential, and specifically around kind of hyperinflated countries in Latin America. Financial inclusion was a big topic. And I wanted a place where, yes, we could talk about the huge potential, but then we could also be real about where the limitations of this technology are. Who are we actually serving? Does this actually mean financial empowerment for people in emerging economies? Does this actually bring wealth, generational wealth creation for people who have been excluded from traditional financial systems in the past? That's why I started it. And it's been kind of gone through several evolutions. It started as an in-person meetup in New York We survived the pandemic, and now it's a digital kind of virtual semi-regular meetup. And it is a really special place for me and a great group that gets together.
That's fantastic. Do you think during the bear market, do you think the people that were part of Blockchain Latinx, they were able to stay in it and not leave and exit because they had that safe space with you that you created?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it's been several cycles now that Blockchain Latinx has been around. There's certainly a cohort of people who've been around since the beginning. And we've seen the highs and lows of our, not just our careers, but our portfolios. Like we also, give each other a hard time. Like, oh my God, you invested in what? You aped into that. So it really is a space where friends can get together and kind of like share their notes. Every cycle, though, brings a different kind of cohort of people into the fold. So there are people for whom, Blockchain Latinx is their first meetup group ever, and they just have some questions. And then one of the things that brings me the most joy is people who start out in Blockchain Latinx, they want to get a job in Web3 or blockchain or crypto. And then because of what they've learned at the group, they're able to find a job. And then that job takes them elsewhere. Right. So there's like a cheesy expression that says friends for a reason, friends for a season, and friends for life. We have people who are in Blockchain Latinx for just a cycle, just a bull or a bear market. And then we have people who've been there since the beginning. And everyone is welcome. You can come, and I hope it's a place where people get something out of it. And when that ceases to be true, that they can go to other places. Now there's so many different communities that, it just depends on what you're looking for and what's going to serve you the best.
Right. And so since you've been in the space since 2018, how has the Latino community grown in crypto since then?
It certainly feels like it's grown both in size and visibility. So that's awesome. There are so many communities, it's hard to keep track of them. You're a leader yourself in Hola Metaverso. There's also Web3 Familia, Crypto Conexión. There's more kind of technical communities that are focused around getting engineers and developers on board. Librería de Satoshi, Torogos are two that come to mind. The beautiful thing about this is that, particularly for all communities, but I'm Latina, so I can only speak to the Latina experience. There's so much diversity just within this community. Like, just because you speak Spanish doesn't mean you have the same background or you have the same interests as somebody else who speaks Spanish. So seeing how the Latino community has grown, and now there are different groups to serve all of the various and diverse interests within that ecosystem. Right. So there's groups that are, just for, or kind of mainly catered to Latinos who live in Latin America and want to create their community that's more regional and kind of tailored to their experiences. And then there's US-centric groups. I'm a first-generation American. Blockchain Latinx, we've experimented with doing it in English and in Spanish. So yeah, that's a few things that I've seen about how the community has grown. And it's been awesome. I hope to only see it grow more.
Right. Same here. And yeah, because we're not a monolith. So it's great that it's starting to expand and there's, everyone's getting, a space of their own. So is there a key milestone accomplishment that you want to spotlight or, brag? It's time to brag.
Yeah, I feel like this. I struggle with bragging, but you're putting me on the spot and I don't want to let you down.
Thank you.
So there's maybe two things, and they're not key accomplishments, but we'll kind of throw them out there. One is I am really proud of the longevity of Blockchain Latinx.
As you should be.
So it's a special space. It's not, it's not something that when I first created it, that I intended it to be its own organization, or I had a very specific vision for it. And this is a space that I want to create for me to have the conversations that I'm not seeing had anywhere else. Yes. And I want everyone who wants to have access to that group to have it. Being able to maintain that community space and hold that space for others has been such a privilege, even when, life gets in the way. I've, in the past 5 years, I've gotten married, I've moved different state lines, I've changed jobs, things have happened. And yet I'm still able to come back to this community, hold space for them, and then people find value in that and people continue to show up. So that's a big thing that I think is worth bragging about. And then the second one is maybe a little more philosophical. I'm just proud that in every community I've been a part of and every job I've had in Web3, I try to create a culture where it's okay to ask obvious questions.
Yes.
Because there's so much when you first get started, people are laughing at these inside jokes. You don't really get the meme. Maybe you don't know what coin is like, oh, is this a stupid coin? Like, this is a project that my cousin told me I should invest in. Should I invest in that? There's so much of the in-group, out-group dynamic that happens when you're joining a community for the first time or you're exploring this technology for the first time. And making it okay to just ask obvious questions, because sometimes the most obvious questions are the hardest ones to answer.
Yes.
So that's another thing I hold kind of, I think it's okay to praise that.
No, definitely. Yeah, because I know when I came in, I was like, what does this mean? And why are they misspelling things? And, all those things. But asking the questions, being in a space like the one that you have provided since 2018 is so important, because there's a lot of people in your community that I'm sure would have probably been turned off and turned away. But because you created such an amazing space, they're here. And, who's to say what kind of ideas flourish and thrive because of a space that you created. So thank you so much for that. So community, this is a big question, but let's get into it. Communities of color have had a deep bench in Web3, but do not receive necessary funding or coverage in media. Why is it important for this to change?
How much time do we have? This could be a whole seminar.
Right.
This is a question that I think has come up so many times in my career in Web3, and it's complicated. It's a multifaceted question that deserves that type of multifaceted reflection and discussion. So with that caveat, I'll try to kind of briefly highlight a few things for why I think it's important to change.
Okay.
One, it's important to change because there's data-driven evidence that diversity is good. It's good for making better products. It's good for making more profitable companies. So just for that alone, that's why it's important to change. Two, I think it's important to change because as a startup ecosystem or as a tech community, there's kind of a culture that is based on the premise that everyone has the same access to success or everyone has the same opportunity to fail. And if your funding landscape and your media coverage only reflects one type of founder, I think that's a good indicator that there's some invisible gatekeepers worth bringing to light. And gatekeepers aren't always bad. Sometimes gatekeepers serve a function. But if your gatekeepers are invisible or people don't really know the purpose that gatekeeper is serving, that you'll never see these communities get the same access to funding and access to media coverage. So that's the second point. And then the last one, I think this is one that's more complicated for me, is I feel like I don't even know where I stand. I have several different thoughts on this, but in our industry, it's pretty frustrating for me when inclusion or diversity and inclusion, when these complicated and important topics are reduced to kind of like a punchline or a throwaway. Right. And I have to call out, like, we have extremely influential tech leaders, from Peter Thiel to Elon Musk to even Brian Armstrong at Coinbase. These are people who have built incredible companies. They have incredible careers, and their opinions carry so much weight. And when they put out a position that diversity and inclusion is somehow the same as lowering the bar for excellence, that frustrates me, because it makes me feel like we're not having an intellectually honest conversation. It's true that there is always kind of like performative stuff that isn't serving anyone. You could go to a training session that doesn't really hit to the core of the inequity that we see in our workplace or the inequity that we see in our industry. That's fair. And I think that happens a lot more kind of in a social tech platform where people want to like take a picture, check a box, and move on.com. It's much harder to then have conversations about like, how do we systematically change this system? But yeah, I think it is important for that to change, because the more people you bring in, the better products you'll have, the stronger companies you'll have, the more resilient our industry will be.
Yeah, because I get frustrated when you just see the one diversity hire and they think they've completed their quota, which is not it. We need more than that. So next question, what's a substantive use case you think does not get enough attention, but will be transformative in this space?
I've always had a kind of a little candle in my heart for digital privacy. This is a use case that is interesting, is complicated, it applies to everyone. Nobody really thinks about it. But the more and more of our lives that we live online, the more and more it'll be important for us to reevaluate how we think about digital privacy. Privacy in general is not something that we've had to think about that much in communities, or I certainly didn't think about privacy until I started working at a privacy-focused protocol. And even then it brought up really kind of challenging questions for me around like, well, I mean, I kind of do want to observe bad behavior and call it out. Transparency is important to me, but transparency and privacy aren't mutually exclusive. And now that I'm kind of more in the Bitcoin space, there are unfortunately like developers who are going to jail for, for creating privacy preserving technology. And privacy is fundamental. It's something that we really, I'm referring to Tornado Cash, Wasabi Wallet, and Samurai Wallet, although not all have gone to jail, but they've been indicted. There've been several headlines related to kind of developers who are working in open source privacy preserving technology and then kind of getting into hot water with different regulatory or government regimes. But it's a complicated and thorny issue. I don't think it gets enough attention, but I know it will. It's only a matter of time.
Right. So you and Clev have been bringing a delegation of women of color in blockchain to Capitol Hill since 2019 to ensure policymakers are aware of the important role they're playing in the 3 trillion crypto market. How has this experience been transformative for you?
I still can't help but smile when I think back to when Clev first reached out to me, and I'm so grateful that she did. Just an incredible mastermind at bringing people together, at having important conversations and shedding a light on communities that don't get enough of that light. So there are maybe 3 ways in which being part of this delegation has been transformative for me. First and foremost, being part of a community of incredible women who are advancing this industry, who are thoughtful, who speak their mind and speak their values. You don't get to see that all the time in kind of our like social media humdrum, like, oh, I'm scrolling through this, I'm going to catch up with that. So pausing once a year and having community with this incredible group of leaders, that has been transformative. And it's not just, people coming from New York and California. It's successful founders, people who are just starting out from all over the country. And so it really is kind of, you learn from people from all different perspectives and walks of life. So that's been the first and foremost transformative thing. The second is really time with elected officials. So that is such a precious and special resource that we as Americans have access to.
Right.
And the fact that this delegation through Clev's work has really facilitated that contact. So U.S. Representatives Darren Soto and Warren Davidson, they were one of the very first reps who supported our 2019 delegation. U.S. Representative Stacey Plaskett has also attended more than one to address the delegation. And hearing from these people, these leaders, is really helpful to add nuance to topics that were kind of foreign to me before that. One experience in particular stands out, hearing from U.S. Senator Cory Booker. He gave such a nuanced and thoughtful discussion around kind of a regulatory framework for crypto. And what he used was his experience creating a regulatory framework for legalizing marijuana in his state of New Jersey. And he was just so real about like, listen, this was the same thing. People were promising financial inclusion. People were promising financial empowerment. Right. And this is how it panned out. So as person who feels strongly about the potential for this technology, hearing from him firsthand, I've always kept that with me. And then lastly, just educational and policy. I think as people who work in this industry, we say we need a regulatory framework, but I don't really know what that means. And so
Right.
learning about policy, right? Like what is a framework? Learning the challenges for kind of making laws that do all of these things. So it needs to be easy to follow. It needs to protect individuals from scams and frauds. And then it also needs to foster innovation. It's really hard to do all of those things, especially if the people who are writing those laws have a very naive understanding of how the technology works. So that's where, as an industry, we have a responsibility to show up and explain as many times as it takes. We can't feel entitled to expecting that these elected officials who are worried about a million different things, that they need to prioritize our industry just because we're really passionate about it.
Right. No, that makes sense. Well, hopefully I'll get to see you guys this year for that.
I would love
So,
that.
are there Latino founders building interesting projects that you would like to highlight?
There are so many, but I feel like I have to shout out just a few. Top of mind, Mónica Talan. She's doing an amazing job with Crypto Conexión. Marina Spindler with Torogos. Dulce Villarreal with Librería de Satoshi. These are women who have created their own communities. They've supported me when I needed it the most, and they're supporting others. It's like such incredible work that they do. So follow them or check out those projects. And then I've recently participated in the Optimism retroactive public goods funding rounds. I wasn't as familiar with that ecosystem, but a friend of mine encouraged me to get more involved. And as part of the Optimism governance group, there are 2 Latino women who are just rock stars, Lau and Brichis. I don't know them personally. I'm just fans from across the internet, and I feel like I have to shout them out as well. So those are the interesting folks that I follow.
That's fantastic. I love hearing about I'm familiar with some, and now I'm going to look into the others. So what's something that people would be surprised to know about you that maybe has nothing to do with blockchain, crypto, or anything like that?
I used to have my own radio show in college.
Of course, coming from media.
The underground sound.
Excuse.
That was, yes. I had my own radio show in college. It was amazing. I played world music, and I still love independent radio. Everybody has access to an independent radio station. So if you're not familiar with them in your community, if you live in the United States, you most likely have access to one. And like, it's the best way. Like, Spotify's cool. Independent radio is cooler for sure.
Definitely. Because especially you fall in love, like I'm sure so many people fell in love with you, Elena, and they're like, oh, she brings this. I want to learn these artists from you. I totally get it and I see it. So before we leave, let the people know what's the best way to stay in contact with you and get all the amazing information from you.
The best way to keep in contact or follow me is I'm religious about my Twitter habit. And so if you follow me on Twitter, that's the way to stay updated. Elenita_tweets is my handle. And that's the best way to get in touch and reach out. I love meeting folks. I love hearing different people's backgrounds. And if there's a way that I can support your journey in Web3, I'd be honored to.
Thank you so much. And for anyone that's watching or listening, that's just not lip service, kids. This really happens in this space. Like, let me let you know a lot of people might say, but in this space, for me personally, and I'm sure for you, if someone says, DM me, you can DM them and they will contact you back and help you. So please follow up because this is an amazing resource. Elena, muchísimas gracias for being here. We appreciate you and, excited to see what you do in the next couple of years because you've done so much already.
Thank you, Ritzy. Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us, our Butterscotch Queens and Kings. Our next guest is going to be Shonda Fields, who is the Director of Product for Indexing at Coinmetrics. Gracias.